Hey guys, Michael here. Hope that you're all doing great today. Okay, I already know some of what's going to come up in the comments, and that's fine. I just want to go ahead and throw out a couple of disclaimers right away. If you feel like this game sucks, that's a valid opinion. If you feel like this game doesn't suck, but it's not as good as it should be, and you're pretty annoyed by Creative Assembly, then not only is that a valid opinion, but that's probably more or less where I was at about a week ago after the Tides of Torment announcement came out, and I kind of realized, another DLC doesn't really move the needle very much for me at this point. My perspective is I'm a little frustrated by the ratio of effort that goes into this game, the ratio between work being put into releasing new DLC versus work being put into fixing existing flaws in the game. And believe me, there's plenty of flaws in the game that really do deserve to get worked on. I would like to see something, I don't know, somewhere in the vicinity of maybe 80-20. I realize from a business standpoint, they're always going to put the preponderance of effort into releasing new DLCs because that's the moneymaker versus doing existing support. They pretty much only want to do enough support to make sure that they don't lose more existing customers than what they're going to gain from sales with the upcoming DLCs. I get all that, and even so, I'm still a little frustrated because things that they tend, and by they, obviously Creative Assembly, things that Creative Assembly tends to hail as like really, great bug fixes and things like that. An awful lot of them are pretty underwhelming at this point. So, all that being said, that's about where I was at a week ago, and that's a perfectly valid opinion as well. However, I want to dig into that a little bit more because that's not where I'm at anymore. The reason I'm showing this old video from my channel here, this is actually the video with which I launched my channel 2 years ago, a little bit, just a tiny little bit less than 2 years ago. And it was this video, Warhammer 3 is better than you think. And I'm just going to kind of let it play here in the background. I made a mild attempt at humor here at the beginning of the video, but the point that I was making in that video was, yeah, there's a lot of things that we could criticize about the status of Warhammer 3. And keep in mind, this was released basically at the low point after the Shadows of Change DLC. And I admitted in this video that there were plenty of things that Creative Assembly was doing wrong, and there were valid reasons for criticism. And yet at the same time, there's still a lot of fun to be had in the game. And the point I was making is basically that I think that a lot of times we let ourselves get a little bit too wound up by the few things that aren't as good as they should be. And we forget about all the things that are really, really good. So the French have an expression which is plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose. And my apologies to my friend Heclius for absolutely butchering the pronunciation of that. It's been many years since I've studied French. So anyway, that expression means the more that things change, the more they stay the same. And this video from 2 years ago, this Warhammer 3 is better than you think video, is kind of exactly how I feel now. We've had some ups and some downs since then. They've had two DLCs since then, one really good, one not great. It was pretty meh. And of course, we've got a third one coming up. We've had some fixes, we've had some scandals, we've had some controversies. And yet here we are 2 years later, and my feeling about this game is almost exactly the same as it was 2 years ago, which is basically, yeah, it's easy to get frustrated from the things that aren't working well and from what is clearly not enough of a focus from CA to fix the existing flaws in the game, which are legion. But at the same time, I still have fun with the game. So what has happened to me in the last week? Well, like I said, the Tides of Torment and all the specifics about that, I realized, you know what, that doesn't really move the needle all that much for me. It doesn't really make me more excited about the game. If you hate the game and you're annoyed by somebody even trying to praise it, like what I'm going to be doing for most of the rest of this video, absolutely, feel free to comment in the comment section to this video. As long as you're civil about it and can talk like like a mature adult, I have no problem at all with disagreement. I completely get that. I think that's a fair point of view. We all have a different threshold for how much BS that we're willing to tolerate, and I'm never going to criticize somebody for having exceeded that amount of BS when it comes to this game. I'm not at that point, because what happened to me last week was basically after I kind of, wasn't too particularly motivated by the Tides of Torment stuff. That's when I decided, to go back and play some of the mods, in particular, some of the really big mods that have been on my list for a while that I haven't really, done all that much on. And so I tried this campaign that I've released the video on very recently, which was set in the Old World campaign mod, which was an absolute, just a fantastic campaign. It was really a ton of fun. I decided to play some obscure faction that I had never played before, and then, coming off of that, I decided to do the same thing. I'll switch the background video here to show a little bit of me playing using the Mortal Empires Expanded mod, which is the same sort of thing. This gives you the opportunity to play with an expanded map, and certainly, some new regions and provinces and parts of the world that, that aren't the same old, but also, lots of new factions. So what it really comes down to is what this game really does so well, despite its flaws, is that there's just so much replayability. There's so many different factions that you can play as, many of them unlocked by the mods. More on that in a minute. But even if you're sticking to just the vanilla legendary lords and factions, there's still so much replayability, and so many of them have unique mechanics, and the fact that they start in different parts of the world with different enemies and different wars break out and whatever. There's just an awful lot of sandbox experience that is, at least for me, refreshing enough that I can keep playing over and over and over again. And despite momentary setbacks like I had a week or so ago, I'm able to kind of revitalize my interest in the game. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room, which is, of course, that none of this would be possible, or at least an awful lot of it would not be possible, without the modding community. So to me, that's really the thing that keeps this game alive, that keeps me continuously coming back to it. And so, you can consider this a little bit of a tribute to the modding community. And I'm really happy to say that since I've started covering more mods and doing showcases of them and just using them in Let's Plays, I've gotten to know quite a few of the modders. I always appreciate it when you guys are making comments on my videos, and some of you I've actually had side conversations with as well. So that's been just a fantastic experience for me as well. But it's absolutely the devotion of the modding community that has made this game what I consider it to be, which is that flawed masterpiece, but good enough to keep me coming back to it. And that's really the main point that I wanted to make with this video. Going back to what I said are valid opinions at the beginning of this video, which is basically, if you hate the game, that's fine. I'm not going to try to talk you into coming back. If you are just disappointed enough in the game because of the bugs and whatever that you're just not excited about playing it, I'm just going to throw this out there. Maybe try to approach it the way that I did. If you don't want to, absolutely fine. If you want to dislike the video, if you dislike the fact that I'm even talking this way, that's fine. You know what? Perfectly valid to have that opinion. But maybe to just take a step back and think about it. And is there a way that you can still get a ton of fun out of this game? Because that's what happened to me. There's still an awful lot of fun to be had here. There's still, that combination of strategy and tactics and so many different kinds of mechanics to choose from and so many different lords to choose from, so many different mods to choose from that, just give this game such incredible replayability. If you consider yourself an armchair general and you like both the strategy and the tactics, there's still just so much to be gotten out of this game, and it would be a little bit of a shame to throw the baby out with the bathwater because of the problems that are in it. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that there's a wide range of opinions out there, and they're all valid. You know what? If you pay for a game, you have the right to enjoy it or not enjoy it any way that you prefer. If you feel like you haven't gotten your money's worth, then, absolutely, I think you should be allowed to voice your frustration. If you feel like you're just annoyed by seeing the potential that's in this game and realizing that it's never going to reach that potential because Creative Assembly just isn't committed to accomplishing that, well, then you're pretty much, like I said, where I was at a week ago. But just kind of take a step back and think, okay, the world's not always going to be what I wish it were, but if I try to make the best out of what it really is, and with respect to this game, then maybe there's a way to, change up the way that you're approaching the game to still have a ton of fun out of it. So that's kind of all I'm getting at, is that I do think if you're committed to quitting this game, nothing wrong with that. If you're thinking about quitting the game, on the other hand, maybe just try to approach it a different way. There's lots of different ways to play this game that I have tried to do on this channel. There's Let's Plays that are using tons of different mods. There's also just, kind of different philosophical approaches to try. If you feel like ramping all the difficulty up and then all that leads to is cheesing the game, then, in order to beat it, which I know is the case with a lot of people. That's a comment that comes up quite often. It's a fairly valid comment, I think, for people to say, I don't like to play with these mods that, make things harder because it just encourages me to cheese even more. Well, you can use house rules like I use, which is I'm anti-cheese. I don't like ever using cheese. And there's different house rules like that you can kind of use to try to approach playing the game in ways that not everybody else is doing. And that's really the other thing I was going to make, is just because you see a bunch of YouTubers doing something, that doesn't mean that you need to play the same way. And so there's different ways to approach a game like this. And think about what's your preferred way of approaching it, and go with that. And who cares whether or not other people would play the same way or not. Play the way that makes the most fun to you. But all right, anyway, hopefully I got my point across at somewhere in there. But as always, I do welcome the feedback. I feel like there'll be a lot of you who probably agree and think that there's still quite a lot of enjoyment to be had out of this game. If I've encouraged anybody at all to, come to question whether or not they really want to stop playing it, and maybe to approach playing it in a different way than they have before, maybe using some new mods, or maybe, just approaching it from a different philosophical perspective, whatever it is, then I feel like maybe I've accomplished something with this video. So, and with the channel, because that's really what the channel's all about as well. All right, well, I'm just going to go ahead and wrap it up right there. As always, feel free to leave whatever feedback you want to. Just keep it civil. Every once in a while, I do have to delete comments because people sometimes don't know how to talk like adults. But I know that's not going to apply to any of you guys, so I'm just going to go ahead and leave it at that. Thanks, everybody, so much for watching and listening, and I will see you all in the next video.